Hi, everyone. This is Miranda with the Valuable Voices podcast. I am excited to have Jilliann Woods today. She actually listened to Sue Donaldson's podcast. So I love how, I love when people hear and they just want to come on. I cannot wait to hear Jillian's story. I already feel like emotionally connected to you. So thankful and grateful to have you on, Jilliann. You look great.
Oh, thank you, Miranda. I'm just delighted to be here and really appreciate the opportunity to speak to your audience.
Yeah, well, let's dive in. I know you have a podcast. I know you have a website, but let's kind of start with your story. Again, unfortunately, I can relate, and you mentioned the word epidemic, and I really want you to kind of touch on what you shared and your story.
Okay. Well, the reason that I use the term epidemic is because of the research I've done based on my background and what I've struggled with and where I've come from. And according to the United States Department of Justice, hidden abuse is a global epidemic. And it covers a lot of different types of abuse. There's emotional abuse, verbal abuse, psychological abuse, spiritual abuse, financial abuse, and of course, there's domestic violence. And what I discovered in my journey is that there were many years of my life, decades of my life, when I didn't understand that what I was experiencing and why things kept going wrong for me was that I was tolerating abuse. I was in abusive relationships without being aware because it seemed normal to me. The way I was treated seemed normal to me. And I know there are a lot of women like me who may not realize they're in an abusive situation, or they perhaps might suspect and are wondering and aren't sure and don't know where or how to find help or answers. And so I have a passion for being available to those women and reaching out to them. My story, my personal story, began when I was a child. I was born into a dysfunctional family where we had love, and we also had one of my parents who was very emotionally and psychologically abusive and verbally abusive. And because I learned how to cope with that and how to survive as a child, and I developed these coping mechanisms. And of course, when we're doing that, we don't realize it. It's a subconscious activity. So when I left my nuclear family and went to college and got out into the world and jobs and education and everything, I wound up going into a marriage with an abuser who, of course, seemed charming and said all the right things and did all the right things prior to marriage. And that led to a 20-year marriage. And the silver lining to that marriage are 3 amazing children that I'm very close to and have wonderful relationships with, by the grace of God. With our children, that can go either way. And we've had ups and downs, but I am very grateful to be close to my children. And they've gone through a lot with me, because when that marriage to their father ended, I went on to be married 3 more times.
Wow.
And it's like the definition of insanity. We keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result. And I grew up as an idealist. Even though a wonderful romantic relationship wasn't modeled for me by my parents, somehow I got the impression that that was in my future. And I was determined that I was going to be a good wife, a good Christian wife, a good Christian mother. And when my 20-year marriage blew up, I married again after about 2 years. What I didn't realize was that I hadn't healed from my experience. I hadn't learned what had happened and why. And that's why I do what I do. That's why I've created a podcast. I'm writing 2 different books. One is the story of my life, but that I have written, but I'm not going to publish it yet. There's a second book that will be published first, and that one is kind of like a Christian self-help book for women that are dealing with any type of abuse. And so that one will be published first. And of course, I don't know if I said I'm starting a podcast, but I also have a private website where I offer an online course. And in that course, I teach the things I wish that I had known decades ago, and I could have avoided a lot of trauma in my life. And I could have come to healing a lot sooner in my life. And of course, God knows all about everything, and his timing is perfect in our lives. So I'm not living with heaps of shame and regret, because I have experienced healing from the Lord, and he's given me a passion and a ministry now that I am pursuing. And so in the online course that I teach, we start with what are the attributes and characteristics of a truly toxic person, a person who is an abuser. We all say toxic things. We all have our bad moments, but normal, healthy people have regret and ask for forgiveness and say they're sorry. And a truly toxic person doesn't care. They don't, a psychopath or sociopath doesn't have a conscience. And so there's a big difference when we're talking about who is toxic and who is not. And so we talk about those things, and then we talk about the fact that toxic people are strategic and target their victims. And when I look back on all of my relationships, with the exception of my parent, I can see that, yes, I was targeted, I was groomed, I was tested, and I passed the test with flying colors because I'm a nice person. I'm a forgiving person. I want to please people. I'm a recovering people pleaser. And I don't like confrontation. I wanted to avoid confrontation. And as an idealist, I had this picture in my mind of what my life would be like. And it was easy to read. And most of us, or many of us who fall victim to toxic relationships, have these characteristics, or a few of them at least. So we go through that, and then we look at what God says about abuse in the Bible. And in Luke 4:18, Jesus himself opens a scroll and reads to the scribes and Pharisees what Isaiah had to say in Isaiah 61:1. And that is that Jesus said, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind." And I didn't know it, but I was captive. I wasn't free, and I was blind to things, and I was blindsided often. And so we talk about the power that we have as Christians, because the Lord lives in us, and we can call upon his strength and in his power, and we can learn to be bold, and we can learn to stand up for ourselves as we are educated and learn to recognize all the dynamics that are involved in an abusive relationship. And that's why my ministry is called Be Bold and Live Free, because that's what the Lord wants for us. We're designed as creative beings. We have been given a divine calling since before we were born, and God wants us to have the ability to live that out. And when we are thwarted at every turn in a relationship with a partner who is manipulative, selfish, abusive, we don't get to live out our divine calling. And so we don't need to feel guilty about thinking about how to completely restructure our relationship, or to take a time out, or in severe cases, even to figure out a way to leave. And so that kind of in a nutshell is my background and what I'm about these days.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing. I can't imagine being married 4 times. And I know that that's kind of what that is, right? You're just going to jump right back into that same relationship if you don't get healing, right? So was there a breaking point or something where it was like what happened to kind of shift that, or to change, or to start that healing process for you?
Well, in my most previous marriage, of course, it was years ago now, but I did wait for 5 years before I remarried, with the belief that I would never remarry again. But this man kind of was very wise in how he courted me. I didn't realize I was being courted, and he was wooing me. And I had known him for over 19 years through a church situation and through a job situation. And I thought I knew him. And he would tease me, and, oh yes, you don't want to live the rest of your life alone. One of these days, the right man's going to come along. And he was charming and fun, and I began going to lunch with him, and then it turned into dinners, and then it turned into being really good friends. And then when we married, within 3 weeks, he was another person that I didn't recognize, unless we were in the presence of other people. But behind the closed doors, behind the scenes, I knew that I had made another horrific mistake. And it was the worst experience that I had had. And it went on for 6 years, because as a Christian, I could not face thinking that I was going to be divorced again. And I just wanted to do anything I could to avoid that. Well, he knew that prior to our marriage, because I said, I never wanted to get married again because I can't face another failure. That was a weapon in his arsenal. And it was when I reached the point of being so depleted, emotionally, psychologically, physically. I was actually ill. I had taken myself to emergency 3 times, thinking I was having a heart attack.
Wow.
And finally, my husband saw a psychiatrist, and his psychiatrist prescribed his medication because he had antidepressant and anxiety meds and a chemical imbalance. And he would take me to these appointments with him after we were married. And he got so frustrated with me at one point. He said, I want you to see my psychiatrist by yourself. You're crazy. You're sick. You're crazy. Well, little did he know I was thrilled to have that opportunity.
Right.
And his psychiatrist was willing to see me. And his first question was, does he hit you? And then he told me, he said, Jilliann, you are in no way equipped to deal with what is wrong with your husband. And he explained what was wrong. And I knew he was right. And I knew it was God rescuing me, because he said, I am going to help you leave, and we're going to leave today.
Wow. Wow. That is a blessing.
It was at that point that I realized that I was allowing a person to come between God and me. And I had never seen that. I had never realized that idolatry was seeping in and creeping in. When I would get married, realize I was in trouble, I would ask God to help me, beg him to fix my marriage. But what I didn't realize was that in order to survive, I was putting this man first before God.
Yeah.
Trying to please him at the same time begging God for help. And when I realized that, it was like a light went on, a hallelujah chorus, began to sing. And I just fell to my knees, and I gave that last little 0.0005% of myself over to God, and I stopped trying to control my relationships. And that's when everything changed in my life. And I'm grateful to God for that experience. And I immediately found that deeper level of intimacy with the Lord. And everything I had longed for in a relationship had been available to me all along.
Yeah, sometimes our eyes just have to be open, right? I think, you know, whether we're believing lies that we're not good enough, we're not worthy, we think it's normal because that's how we grew up. We learned to cope. We didn't know anything different, you know? I mean, you can watch the movies and you can meet other people and you can think, oh, you know, I want a marriage like that. But you're right. I had no idea how manipulative and wise people could be, you know, and I fell victim and prey, you know, and again, it's mind blowing to me. And again, it's just too bad because I know that there's many women stuck in this situation. So besides the obvious, like sign up for your course, listen to your podcast, what would be like that one piece of advice to a woman that's kind of stuck and like doesn't know what to do? I mean, maybe it is seek professional help. Maybe it is just get on your knees to pray to the Lord. But, you know, is there like one or two pieces of advice that you would say to somebody that kind of feels like, I don't know what else, I don't know what to do?
Yes. If you're going through this alone and you haven't confessed to anyone or shared with anyone what's really going on in your relationship, confide in a trusted friend or two.
Yeah.
I think that we become isolated without really knowing it. And part of that isolation is kind of living behind a facade and not having anyone that we can be truly authentic with. And that would be the first step I would advise someone to take, other than what they're probably already doing and praying and asking God, and sometimes reaching out to our church. We don't really find the help we need because churches aren't always equipped to deal with this problem. And the first thing I did after I realized that I needed help was I got myself back into a Bible study with women, and I attended a Bible study in the evening at my church. And it's a large church, and there were like 120 women there, divided up into tables of 8. And they placed me at table 11 years ago now. And those 7 women are my best friends. Wow. And they went with me through all of my process, which took years of healing and getting on my feet and getting into ministry. And they're my cheerleaders, my prayer warriors. And it's community along with our relationship with the Lord, because God divided it and, created us for community as part of the body. And that is just one thing I would really want women to understand, how important that is, even if it's one friend.
Yeah, I agree. Somebody that can kind of take a look from the outside, right? Because sometimes when you're kind of stuck in it, you cannot see all the crazy, right? So as you talk to other women or other people in your life, and then they can encourage you and say, I've had many friends breathe life into me, like, you deserve better, you know, and just encourage me and love me. And that has been one of the best things for me. So that is great. Well, thank you so much. I want you to tell us your podcast and your website and where people can check you out.
Okay, well, if you go to my website, it's jilliannwoods.com, and there are 2 N's in Jilliann. And on my website, there is my podcast page.
Awesome.
And I also have a ministry called Be Bold, Live Free. And that website can also be found on my website, information about that. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and I'm sure all your book information will be there. I cannot wait to just keep in touch and follow your story. Again, super inspiring. I mean, way too many women have lived that. And I love seeing women on the other side that are free finally, right? Like free at last.
Yes.
There's nothing better. There's nothing more joyful and amazing to see. So I love your story, and I'm super thankful for you hopping on here. So God bless you, and keep in touch, okay?
Thank you so much. It's been a privilege.
Awesome. Well, if anybody else knows anybody, again, I just believe everybody has a voice. And for me, it was just making sure you're listening to those valuable voices in your life, like God, like people that are lifting you up and breathing life into you, because you deserve that. So if you're interested, I would love to have anybody else on. You don't need a book or a podcast or anything. Just your story is inspiring. And I feel like just sharing that and just your voice is valuable. So God bless you all, and thanks for your time today.